Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Harrogate series. Harrogate is a large borough, one of the 11 districts of North Yorkshire. It's got 139 civil parishes. Which one are we in this episode? Welcome back to Harrogate, everybody. Now today I brought you to a very, very small place within the borough, and I'm standing at a set of gates. See here? Now this is a landmark which we'll talk about more in next week's episode, because it actually falls within the parish boundaries of that one. However, the entrance to it is here within the parish boundaries of this one, and it will sort of get talked about. This is a stud and it belongs to Copgrove Hall. Welcome to the parish of Copgrove. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Copgrove, little wood on a hill. Hello again, Harrogate folks. It's time for another one of your district's tiny villages. Small villages with an individual charm are often described as sleepy, and that description certainly applies to Copgrove. Lying in the rolling morainic land between Knaresborough and Boroughbridge, and on the western flanks of the Plain of York, Copgrove is dominated by its hall, set on a low hill overlooking a large reed-fringed lake and 1,000 acres of wooded, game-filled land. At its western edge is Robert Beck, a stream which was formed thanks to glacial meltwater when the vast ice sheet that once covered this part of Yorkshire receded. A village with a modest population of less than 200, Copgrove lies on a dead-end road, although there are some public rights of way too. It doesn't have a lot. Landmarks-wise, it has a church and some tidy-looking houses, but this one does have a legend to speak of. Copgrove has been famous for centuries for a well named after a Celtic saint, which supposedly had healing powers. The village's main street is even named after the saint in question. You should see this episode, by the way, as like a part 1 of 2, because it has a direct link to next week's episode in the form of Copgrove Hall's stud, which straddles the boundary. So, without further ado, let's get to it. We begin at the end of the village, literally. Copgrove is a dead end, and you can go no further into the village than this point right here, the end of St Mungo's Court. It's a newish build street tagged onto the end of St Mungo's Lane, and both streets are wholly residential. It's the name of them though that's the interesting part. St Mungo was a Celtic saint, and an obscure one at that. His name had several spellings like Mungo or Mung-ho. The name literally means the dearest one, and it was given, inexplicably, to a local well. The well still exists to this day. It's sited not far from Copgrove Hall, close to 3 Druid stones. It's also on a track, believed to be a former Roman road, to the town of Isurium Brigantum, now buried under the silts of the River Ure. Over the centuries, thousands of people have immersed themselves wholly in the waters of St Mungo's Well, believing it will cure their ailments. It's said to have mystical healing powers. That claim must have been valid enough for it to have influenced the name of Copgrove's main street, effectively the entire village. At the southernmost point of civilization is the church dedicated to St Michael and All Angels. This is a simple church with a nave and a chancel which stands on the remains of a much older pre-conquest building. By 1216 it's known Copgrove's religious building belonged to the Knights Hospitallers. It's been rebuilt since then, mainly in 1897 and 98, under the watchful eye of that man, Hodgson Fowler. A window in the chancel is the only remaining 12th century feature. This one was also open, so let's go in and see what's in there. Inside, the first things of note can be found on the back wall, 2 tablets bearing the name of Bridgemen. The Bridgemans lived in Copgrove Hall, and the 2 most important of their number were Sir Francis, Vice Admiral of the United Kingdom, and his wife, Lady of the Manors of Copgrove and Walkingham. St Michael's other notable feature is called the Devil Stone. It has a rubbing of a figure holding a severed head and a sacrificial knife, identified by historians as Sheila na gig, the Celtic goddess of creation and destruction. Now, as well as the tablets on the wall, check out this slab which you'll find in the chancel. Now, it's all in Latin, but I can tell a few bits. It's obviously to a Richardson. There's a name Richardson there. And down the bottom, it says 1702. So I would assume that whoever lies here is a Richardson, and he died in 1702. The rest of it, I can't obviously read it because A, it's very faded and worn away, and my Latin is not the best in the world. So if anybody wants to try and sort of translate it, if you can read it, then please do let me know in the comments down below what it says. I imagine it probably just says something like, in loving memory of whoever this guy is. So that's in the chancel. If I just tilt the camera up, there you go, you can see the rest of the nave and everything else. There's plenty more tablets and things on the wall either side, but it's the Bridgemans at the back which were the most interesting to me. Right, so we've reached the church, and now we've got to make our way back to the beginning, because Copgrove is effectively it for the village, because after this the road just runs off towards the next one, barring a business which I will drive around on the way out. But before we do that, I also need to give you a little bit more about Copgrove Hall, because of course we can't access it being private property. So that's coming your way right now. Copgrove Hall is simply magnificent. It was built in the 1820s, but the landscape around it dates back further to a time when an original hall stood in its place. In the 1760s, the lake in front of it was designed by Thomas White, and by the start of the 20th century, Copgrove Hall commanded nearly 400 acres of extensive parkland, plantations and pleasure grounds, as well as 2 ice houses and a large walled kitchen garden. As mentioned in the church, Copgrove Hall was the home of the Bridgeman family and the Vice Admiral of the United Kingdom, but it's had another notable owner too in the past. Many locals know this massive mansion as the one-time home of the late Guy Reed, the man who founded logistics company Reed Bordell. Based in Boroughbridge, they're one of the largest temperature-controlled distribution businesses in the UK, and they deliver and store frozen food. Reed also once owned Nid Hall, and as a racehorse owner, he operated both Nid Hall Stud and Copgrove Hall Stud as well. Come back next week for more on the latter. As you exit the village to the south, you'll pass Jubilee Court, a small industrial estate with a handful of businesses. The largest of these is Abacus Direct, who occupy Abacus House. They make and supply bathroom furniture such as cabinets, bath panels, bath and towel racks, and even ceramic wall tiles. Basically, if it's found in a bathroom, it'll be in there. Given how many thousands of people have flocked to Copgrove to bathe in some local water, the irony was not lost on me that there's a bathroom supplies facility here. The industrial estate is also the location of the local delivery unit for the multi-million-pound logistics company Evri, formerly known as Hermes, and ParcelNet before that. That's been Copgrove, but as I said at the start, this is only half of the story. Next week, we'll be exploring the tiniest parish yet in Harrogate, one that's a mere speck on the landscape, but it has Copgrove Hall stood within its boundaries, and that has its own historical interest. Come back next week to find out a bit more about it. See you later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.